Hi everybody, sorry about this crazy screen. Let me get to our presentation. Okay, so as you can see, we are going to be looking into business opportunities in Mexico. We are excited to present our proposal and different product launching ideas that we think could be very successful. Our production team deserves a lot of credit thanks to their extensive research. We have Krista Blair, Karen Riddle, James Clark, Ammon Lewis, Jennifer Vasquez, and I am the spokesperson today, and my name is Katie Peterson. As a team, we have analyzed nearly every aspect of business from culture to economy in Mexico, and we will start our presentation by going over the cultural differences between the Mexico and the United States. So here we have the Hofstede dimensions, and as you can see, this chart is broken up into blue and purple. The blue indicates Mexico, and the purple indicates the United States. The Hofstede dimensions are a set of 6 cultural dimensions, and they're measured in the different sections are power distance, individualism, masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation, and indulgence. And these are just used to help understand the differences in our cultures. This graph shows the significant areas of concern. And you can see that long-term orientation, we're not super worried about. The ones that are areas of concern are the first one right there, power distance. The extent to which the less powerful members of institutions and organizations within a country expect and accept that power is distributed unequally. And then indulgence is another one that we are quite different from Mexico in, and the definition here is the extent to which people try to control their desires and impulses. While these areas do arise concern, the most crucial area of concern is individualism. You can see that there is quite the difference there. The US is on one end and Mexico is on the very other end. And individualism is the degree of interdependence. Sorry, this is the definition. The degree of interdependence a society maintains among its members. So Mexico is much more concerned with the group rather than the individual, whereas in the United States, we are more concerned about individual and what's in it for me. And we'll go into a little bit more about this in the next slide. So this really goes along with individualism because in Mexico, the biggest thing is their family. Family is the most important and should be put above everything else. So they don't love to work on the weekends because of family times. Holidays are strict, no working days, so that you can spend it with your family. This cultural aspect has helped make the country very flexible in time management. They're not afraid to put off a task or job for family or really just in general. Families don't like confrontation generally, so the culture as a whole just tries to be indirect in their communication and sugarcoat things. So obviously, this applies to all aspects of the working place as well. So it is recommended that when doing business with anyone from the Mexican culture, to be very polite, sugarcoat things, and when giving constructive criticism, just be very positive and indirect, not so harsh, because if you offend them, it will make doing business with them very hard, and maybe it won't work at all. Another thing that this goes into play with the Mexican culture is when negotiating with them. There's a lot of negotiation that goes on in business. And our recommendation is just to always keep your end game in mind. When you feel like you're negotiating and it's not going anywhere and you're not being able to communicate the way you want, what is it that you're really trying to get out of this negotiation? Because if you can do it the way that it works best with the Mexican culture, such as not being overbearing and being polite and sugarcoating things, it will go over a lot more smoothly, even though that's not the way you would normally negotiate in the United States. So key points to remember when negotiating is when it comes to selling your product or agreeing with importing and exporting in situations, it is important to compromise and listen to your opportunities. So those are our two biggest things, is to be willing to compromise and to always listen. And before you snap back with a snark comment, or maybe you're not upset, but just always be polite in your communication. And then also know the product, know the numbers, know so that you're not too high or too low when you're negotiating. And those are our recommendations and cautions for you when negotiating with Mexico. So now we want to look into more of the government and politics of Mexico. So Mexico is a federal republic consisting of 31 states. In the recent 2018 election, a left-wing party was put into power for the first time in recent history. And this picture here is a picture of President Obrador. And his election is really revitalizing the country. He is concentrating on reforming policy to tackle corruption, crime, and poverty. And the Mexican country as a whole is super excited about this. He's also promised that entrepreneurial freedom will be respected and that financial and fiscal discipline will be maintained. So the June 3rd election also saw more left-wing. So it's called the National Regeneration Movement, or Morena. So there were more officials elected to Morena. And this was also very exciting to help tackle the corruption and crime and poverty going on. However, there has been a recent tariff standoff with the United States, and it's causing unrest in the business sectors. This is definitely something to be cautionary about. So although the government has really shown a lot of promising potential, the tariff issues we are currently facing with them are definitely concerning. Like I said, we always need to stay updated on that movement. But we are very hopeful that the regulation can be made between our two countries. So we want to look at the business environment. An interesting way to analyze how it would be to do business is to check out doingbusiness.org ranks. Mexico, as you can see, ranks 94th. Now this ranks 94th out of 190 countries. So this is nothing alarming, but obviously not as exciting. So it's not every country in the world, just like I said, 190. And sorry, 54, not 94. Ooh. So yeah, obviously it's not the best. It's not like it's top 10, but it is when compared against 190 countries. There's nothing too concerning about that. So there really are some nice perks to doing business in Mexico. We'll start with the contract processing. So Mexico ranks 43rd, and this really shows how effective Mexico is at enforcing contracts. It can take anywhere around 350 days, so just about a year. This may seem like a long time, but when comparing to other countries, they can end up taking really about 4 times that long. So that is a nice perk. And the ease of starting a business is ranked just below half. So this makes us confident that although it won't be unrealistically easy, it shouldn't be too hard either. Taxes, though, are a drawback. They can end up around 35% for residents, and for non-residents, which would be us, can be even higher. It just depends on where your profits are coming from. They're only higher on profits that are made in Mexico, which with what we're looking into doing with the business, it would be all of our profits would be made in Mexico. So that would be a problem that we'd face. So we recommend caution in one more area, and that is registering property. That can be a pretty onerous task. And it is important to keep that in mind when planning location and construction. But overall, taxes isn't great, but overall, there are no huge hurdles that really can't be overcome when doing business in Mexico. And we have put in 2 charts here so that you can see exactly what we were talking about and the different scores we have for Mexico here. So next we wanted to talk about tariffs and the free trade areas. So Mexico is part of the World Trade Organization with 164 member countries. Under the World Trade Organization agreements, countries are not allowed to discriminate, meaning lower tariffs and incentives. Mexico is also part of NAFTA, or the North American Free Trade Agreement, with the United States and Canada. This agreement is almost tariff-free. In recent years, there have been a few tariffs initiated by the U.S. against Mexico for steel and aluminum products. Mexico, in turn, then imposed tariffs on some precious stones, iron, and steel. So this is really important to keep in mind when deciding what you need to import and export, and also just what your business in general is going to be. So there are some qualifying standards that we wanted to make sure everyone was aware of, and this is in NAFTA. So 50% of the value of the good needs to have been created in North America. And if you're talking about automobiles, which today we won't be, it needs to be 62.5%. So although it is relatively new, the Pacific Alliance, this is consisting of Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile, is proving to promote growth faster than their Latin American counterparts. So that is really cool. Other associations include Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and the Latin America Integration Association. All of these memberships and associations show that expanding business to Mexico could be very beneficial. And we just want to note that the U.S. and Mexico have a very awesome trading relationship. So 40% of imports to Mexico are supplied by the United States, and 80% of exports from Mexico go to the United States. So this shows you really how good our import-export trading relationship is with Mexico. Foreign direct investment. So that is defined as an investment that is made by a firm or individual in one country into business interests located in another country. So this really is what we're looking at here. In the last couple decades, Mexico has changed from a pretty closed economy to a very open economy. As you could tell in the last slide, they have a lot of partnerships and trading agreements with a lot of countries. So they have more FTAs than, and when I say FTA, I'm saying free trade agreements, than most all other countries. So we wanted to take a look deeper into the foreign direct investment status. So because it is an open economy, it makes Mexico a really great option for the United States since we do have such a strong relationship. Like we said, they're both a part of NAFTA, which means almost no tariffs except for the few exceptions that we've already talked about. You can see why it would be important for a prospective country to not have any tariffs when thinking about investing their business into another country, because it's already very expensive and ease of doing business is hard when traveling to another country, and tariffs just make it harder. So there are 2 common types of FDIs, horizontal and vertical. Horizontal is when you run the exact same business in another country that you are currently running in your home country. Vertical is similar, but instead of being exactly the same business, it's just similar to the business you're already running, cooperates with, or enhances your current business that you are already running. Our caution here is to keep in mind that because Mexico's economy is so open, it makes it easy for a lot of other players and other countries to come in with similar products, which could really strengthen the competition and make it harder for you to be successful in your product. The current economic conditions. So they are comprised of 4 main areas, and they are all shown here with their different charts. And it looks like they are shown from 2013 to 2017. So just like within the last 6 years or so. There's GNI per capita, PPP, GDP growth annual percentage, inflation consumer prices, annual percentage, and lending interest rate. Each area here gives us a look into the main aspects of Mexico's economic condition. With this data, it can help to prepare someone looking to enter with a new product into this market. So just for example, the given data on the GNI per capita is found that from 2013 to 2017, there has been an upward climb. This shows that for those years, the income for that country has gone up, thus having the appearance of a good market to go into. For GDP growth annual percentage, it can be seen that the rate of growth of Mexico is not consistent, which may mean that your product may do really well one year, but then the next it may not. So you need to keep this in mind. When looking at the inflation consumer prices annual percentage, this shows that the inflation rate has increased significantly in the past couple of years. This would also make it seem that it is not a very stable market to go into. The last area is in the lending interest rate. Here one would find that the interest rates have also been rising steadily in Mexico. With higher interest rates, it would be harder to pay off loans, and this would affect cash flow, profits, and pretty much everything. So after analyzing the current economic conditions, it would be wise to use caution before entering business in Mexico. So we all are very familiar with currency in Mexico, at least what it's called. It's called the peso. Now compared to the US dollar, it appears that it's weakening. While over the last 5 years, the value of the peso has fallen. However, in 2018, it was actually the best performing major currency against the dollar. And everyone has attributed this to the election of President Obrador and all the actions that he is taking to strengthen the economy of Mexico. So understanding that the trend toward the peso gaining on the dollar policies will need to be in place to ensure required profit margins are realized. If serious gain in the peso occurs, it could mean a substantial loss of revenues. So we want to get started and introduce to you guys the products that we have. The first one is drone crop dusting. So the need here is huge. Mexico is a super agricultural country. They thrive off their agriculture, and it really holds up to the economy. And the Mexican Secretariat of Agriculture has set standards that they need to live by. So this drone, it wouldn't just drop down any pesticides. They would be organic. And the barriers, they could be more expensive. The drones obviously are more expensive. And there really is no market currently in Mexico. There may be sellers to Mexico, but the only major company that we have seen is only in the United States. And although it is a guideline, it's not an enforced law that they need to be organic. And so as it becomes more accepted and more expected, this will really become a greater need for Mexico. So this is some of the issues that we would run into like I said, the cost to market, the cost to make these would vary greatly depending on the size of the crop. So this is a smaller challenge. In comparison, there really isn't a huge market for this kind of technology, but once it takes off, it could be a really fantastic product and be really successful. It may be bad because we would have to sell the farmers on this new concept since they're not very used to it. So our second product is the washing machine. Now, this isn't your fancy LG, Samsung washing machine. This is, as you can see, very dumbed down, almost like a bucket, but it is way more effective than just rinsing your clothes in the nearest river or whatever water source that you have for that day. As we know, Mexico is a second world country, and they are really able to afford nice washing machines. So not only is it inconvenient, but it's also harmful to those who can't afford to have properly cleaned clothes. So there are two negative side effects to this, along with many more, but the ones that really hit us were poor health. This can really add to poor health and increase diseases. The barriers here are that the poor areas still, although it is way cheaper than a nice washing machine, they still may not be able to afford it. And there is the competition, there really is no other product in Mexico like this, except for, of course, the water sources that they currently use that obviously aren't as effective, but they're free and they already have them. So that could be our competition there. Our last product that we wanted to look at is a human GPS. Mexico is a major port for human smuggling and human trafficking. No matter what kind of police or military force is used to try and prevent it, a new way will be found to continue. Unfortunately, the horrific act. So lately, some Mexican officials took the opportunity to have GPS tracking chips inserted into their bodies for their overall safety. This has been helpful in knowing where the officials are at all times. This kind of tracking device, despite going against human morals, can show how useful and purposeful they can be for those higher up in power. The major issues are that, well, for one, it is going to be hard to get everyone on board to get microchipped. People don't want to have Big Brother tracking their every move. The second is financial. For the Mexican officials to get microchipped, it costs $2,000 up front and an additional $2,000 a year. So that's roughly $170 a month to have this chip service, which most people can't afford. The competition is slim, but all of the updates, the new technologies that will be coming out in general will make the competition a lot tougher. VeriChip already has an advantage for being in the testing stages with this tech on the government leaders. So these chips are a wonderful idea, but it will be a harder sell because of how it will make people feel knowing that they are being tracked and watched. A selling point will be that we can be tracked and watched via smartphone. So Snapchat, Facebook, location update posts, these are where people show where people are in the general area. So these are 3 products that we've discussed as a group that we think can be taken into great consideration. And this was everything we came up with on doing business in Mexico. We hope this was helpful. And that concludes our presentation. We're excited to hear any questions or feedback that you may have with us, for us. And thank you for listening.